Dear 99 women, I want to start by saying what an absolute honour it has been talking with you on these various subjects on women's life and where they stand in the world today. But I have to admit that there is one subject that really kind of got to me. And today we were asked what message we would send to our granddaughters. And even if I don't have a granddaughter, I don't even have a daughter yet for that matter, a lot of things came to my mind. But the first thing that popped up in my head was my own grandmother. And she was born in the Canary Islands in 1936. She was the youngest sibling by far, and she could really thank her existence to the fact that her parents, they needed someone to take care of them in their old age. But my grandmother was, and still is, a very assertive woman, and she had dreams of her own. And she wanted to go to the UK to study medicine, but back then, in order to leave the country for a woman of only 19 years, you had to get your parents to sign your papers. So, filled with hopes and dreams, my grandmother went to her father and asked him to sign her papers. But instead of the warm yes that she had been expecting, she received a slap for her insolence. What need did a daughter of his have for further education? She had everything she needed back home. And if everything else failed, she could just get married. And my grandmother was a very strong young woman, but she was absolutely devastated after this, and she felt as if her dream was being torn from her hands by none other than her own father. But when her mother, my great-grandmother, saw her daughter's plight, she did something probably for the first time and to everyone's surprise. She went against her husband's wishes and, without his knowledge, signed the papers. And my grandmother, she wasted no time. She sold some of her clothes and jewellery, and she fled to London. And here she started studying to become a nurse. And I'll tell you, it was as if a whole new world had opened up to her. And she started living life to the fullest. And then, as it tends to happen, she fell in love. And she fell in love with an Icelandic man, my grandfather. And to make a long story short, they got married, had children, and moved to Iceland. Now, the question posed here today made me think of her because after giving it a thought myself, I think the first message that I would send to my unborn granddaughter is the same thing that my grandmother has told me my entire life. Get an education. It doesn't matter what you do after that, just get an education. And she didn't just throw it out there because it sounded good. My grandmother had first-hand experience of just how education can prove itself to be an invaluable key to independence. But sadly, not all women are so lucky as to have education at their fingertips. And a shocking 2/3 of those who can neither read nor write are women. And not to mention the strong link between lack of education and poverty. Women make up 70% of all those living in absolute poverty. And I have to admit to you, this all seems very strange and alien to me in a way. I mean, the benefits of educating women are countless. Educated women have fewer but healthier children. They're able to contribute their talents to the market, thereby increasing the country's economic growth. And there's also a strong correlation between a country's gender gap and its international competitiveness, simply because a nation's competitiveness in the long run depends significantly on whether and how it utilises half of its resources. Women. So why aren't we educating our women? Now, I believe that the answer may lie in the second message that I would give to my granddaughter. The fight for gender equality or women's rights is not a struggle against a distinct oppressor. It is against a deeply held set of beliefs and assumptions that we women far too often hold ourselves. You see, although it is true that women's rights have come a long way, from just gaining the right to vote to more women than ever graduating from universities, society's deeply integrated belief that women are inferior to men still leads to millions of girls being neglected, murdered, or aborted each year. It is my belief that the 20th century was really the time when we were fighting for civil and political rights for women, and what lies ahead of us in the 21st century is the struggle for social and cultural rights of women, changing the way we think about women in general, to stop knowingly and unknowingly questioning a person's abilities based on their gender. According to the Global Gender Gap Report, as published today, Iceland, my home country, is now for the 5th consecutive year #1 in closing the world's gender gap. And believe me when I say this, this is a fact that Icelanders take immense pride in, and I can't really describe the feeling when I saw the news earlier here today. And it is true, we have come a long way, but we also realize that there's still a long way to go. For example, women still have a 10% unexplainable lower income than men. They only make up 21% of corporate boards, and a shocking third of Icelandic women has been subjected to violence. We know that even if we have come a long way, we have to keep fighting. Because if we force ourselves to feel content with the situation as it is just because we sit on top of these lists, then we'll never reach full equality. And the truth is that the struggle that lies ahead of us is a much less tangible and therefore a more elusive struggle. It requires introspection and awareness. Awareness of the injustice that takes place all over the world, and of course the courage of speaking up when we see it. And thankfully, there are many women in this world who are willing to speak up, even in the face of grave danger. And on October 7th, the BBC ran the first international interview with a 16-year-old worldwide role model, Malala Yousafzai, an absolutely incredible girl who, even after being shot by her adversaries, continues to speak up for women's right to education. It's women like Malala that I want to tell my granddaughter about. So here's the third and final message to her. Know the history of women's rights, but don't be overly grateful for having rights. That's exactly what they are. But do be grateful to the women who fought for those rights and show them the respect of staying aware and speaking up so that their fight won't be in vain or become stagnant. And ladies, I sincerely hope that you all feel as inspired as I do after today's event, and I feel incredibly honoured to be marking the finish of this amazing series by the BBC. And a big thank you to the BBC for its remarkable contribution to women's rights. I have to admit to you, I have no idea what the world is going to be like when my granddaughter is born, but I can tell you this, that after today I'm feeling a lot more positive. And although it may seem impossible at times to change these outdated beliefs that stand in the way of women's education and gender equality as a whole, our world is ruled by little else than thoughts and ideas, and therefore it is in our power to change it. And only through the power of awareness and the courage of standing up can we move forward to an equal and just society. Thank you.